Gay pride celebrations have become a growing tradition in Boston, but this year's events are also a salute to what began as a movement for change. To tell us about this year's events and reflections on the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising are the chair of the Stonewall 50 Boston Pride Committee, Don Gorton, and a participant from Fenway Health. Marching in the parade as the Champion of Stonewall Marshal, Athena Vaughn. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Of course.
First of all, I want to start with Dawn because I think this is a well-known chapter in the LGBT community. But for the rest of us, what was so important about the Stonewall Uprising?
It took place 50 years this month, and it was the largest collective act of gay resistance to police oppression in modern history. Thousands of people protested a police raid on a gay bar, the Stonewall, and out of that melee came widespread community organizing. We had maybe 50 groups, gay groups in the country prior to Stonewall. Within 2 years, there were over 2,000. So it was a bonanza in terms of bringing the community together, giving us a sense of common purpose, and energizing our progress.
Athena, you're marching in this parade almost as a surrogate for one of the most important people in that uprising. Explain that part of the story.
I think that it is amazing that to honor a woman who was one of a kind.
Marsha P. Johnson,
Yes.
right?
And so it's a privilege and an honor to do such. I mean, I can only hope to embody and invoke the presence of who she was and to represent and stand and represent what it is that she stood for. Because it's time now that trans people are acknowledged for the work that they do and for who they are. And for everyone to start realizing that we are a part of the community just like everybody else.
What did she do exactly that made her so special?
She, at the time, was a drag queen. And poetry was one of her things, where she spoke through her issues and her problems and things that she was dealing with. And so she, like everyone, after a while, you just get so aggravated and you just get so turned off with everything going on. And so eventually you want to do something about it. And she actually took the initiative to do something about it. I don't know if I would be able to do what she did, but it took courage to do what she did. And now we know with everything that's going on, there's other avenues on how to deal with these situations, which is amazing. And I also believe that had she not done what she did, we wouldn't have the avenues that we have today.
Dawn, also take us back, explaining the importance of safe space in a gay bar 50 years ago and what was going on by the police that was so threatening.
Well, there weren't many places that gay people could be public. The idea of two guys or two women holding hands on the street was just unknown, unthinkable. So we could only be ourselves in private spaces. Bars in those days all had darkened windows, so you couldn't see in them. And they were typically in rundown areas where others would not turn up. The Stonewall actually was in a very central spot in the village. And a lot of people could come there because it was so centrally located. It really made a difference that the police charged into this LGBTQ safe space in the arrogant and demeaning manner that they did. And it seems like Stonewall, June 28th, 1969, we reached the point of boil over. The anger was just too much, and people took to challenging the police. There was a drag king, a butch lesbian, who resisted arrest. She was being carried out of the bar with two cops on both sides of her. She was fighting them all the way. She went into the police car, got out twice, and then she got put back in, and she called out to to the crowd, which had gathered at that point, and said, "Do something." And her resistance seems to have ignited the riot. And people started throwing pennies at the police officers, coppers. Then they started throwing silver coinage to represent 30 pieces of silver. And then they started with bricks, and some were trying to set fire. But fortunately, that never happened. And what happened afterwards was the police were trying to pursue the rioters, but the streets of Greenwich Village are very patchwork and intricate. And because these were a lot of street people, they knew those streets inside and out. So they could essentially run around behind the cops and come at them from the other side. And it was not clear who was coming and going. So we were really in control of the streets for that time. And after the Stonewall Riots, there was a consensus among activists. We couldn't let this moment pass. This kind of collective mobilization was an opportunity not to be missed. So that's when community organizing got an impetus. We had the Gay Liberation Front, we had the Gay Activist Alliance within 1969, and then Marsha and Sylvia Rivera founded the Street Transvestites Action Revolutionaries. And one of the things they did was to provide a home for homeless LGBTQ youth. So there was a space that they created for the street kids to give them a place to belong. And we started finding more safe spaces after we, I guess, jousted with the police at Stonewall.
Athena, just the other day in Dorchester, I saw the float that Dot Out had, and one of the slogans on it said, "I'm not going to accept the things I cannot change. I'm going to change the things I cannot accept." I mean, how did they get to that mindset?
Dorchester itself?
Yes, I mean, no. I mean, going back, if you go back 50 years ago, what happened in Stonewall, people, they wanted to change what they could not accept.
I think that you come to a point in time in your life where you realize that someone has to be a voice. Whether it's you or whether it's someone you associate with or somebody you call friend or whether somebody you call family, you realize that change has to begin somewhere. And then so many times people will sit back and say maybe tomorrow or maybe next week, maybe in a year. Or I think this is how we should start, and we can start with having this conversation of where to go from here and what to do. Wherefore you have those people and individuals who are saying to themselves, listen, we've sat quiet long enough. Listen, we have sat back and allowed people to be abused and disrespected and killed long enough, and no one has said anything on our behalf. And so it comes to a point in time where it's like you say to yourself, literally, I'm going to be the change. I don't need to accept what will not change, because as long as I am the change, eventually it will change, because someone is making the change aware that it needs to happen. So trans people have been abused, trans people have been ostracized and overlooked and put out of their houses from their families, and they've been killed marginally a lot in the last 2 to 3 years, that you say to yourself, enough is enough. If no one is going to say something, if we as a community have to stand up and say something ourselves to make that change.
And Shana, what about you as an individual? Did you come to a crossroads like that and have to?
I think that, very good question. I think that I grew up in a very spiritual home. So my grandma was the church mother and she was an evangelist. And being a person of color and being trans was a no-no in a religious family. And so I went through a lot where when I turned 18, I felt like I had to show my grandmother that I can survive and still walk in my truth. And so it came a point in my life where I started noticing trans women were dying around me. I started noticing that trans women were becoming homeless by the day. I started noticing that the services that were out there were great for men who have sex with men. I think the services were great for those that identified as lesbian, but there were not that many services for trans people. And so working in the community for 15 years now, the first 7 to 8 years I did a lot of LGBTQ work with Boston Glass and GRI Health and Bagley. And in the last 5 to 6 years, I said to myself, I'm noticing being trans that my community is dying. My community is being overlooked. My community is not being helped at all. And if somebody doesn't step forward and actually do some helping, they're going to continue to die and continue to be ostracized and continue to eventually just be wiped off the face of the earth. Because we're looked at as a community that's just not accepted, as a community that's just abomination or disgusting to people, not understanding that at the end of the day that we're human beings. Just like everybody else, we eat, we sleep, and we use the bathroom and everything. We like to have fun just like everybody else. And so I said to myself, enough is enough. I may not have all the resources that I need, but I have resources to my hands that I can help those in my community. And so I said to myself, I'm not young, I'm not old, but I'm at an age now where standing up is inevitable. I can't sit back and allow my community to continue to go through what it's going through.
This is BNN News. We're talking about this year's Boston Pride celebrations with Don Gorton and Athena Vaughn. Don, what about you? Going back in your own history, was there a sort of a turning point for you too?
Well, I think there was. I grew up in the 1960s in the Mississippi Delta during the heart of the Civil Rights era. And I realized I was gay as an adolescent, and I realized that I probably didn't want to stay where I was as an out gay man. So I came to Boston first to go to BU, then Harvard Law School, and I've been practicing law in Boston since 1985. I've been in the movement since 1986, and I worked on a variety of causes. I think building awareness of Stonewall is as important as anything I've ever done, because Stonewall represents the dispossessed, the rejected, the despised, taking initiative that no one thought they had and making change where no one thought it was possible. It was an extraordinary eruption of the human spirit, and it set in motion a change that is so dramatic 50 years later that it's very hard for LGBTQ people or straight people to understand the persecution we faced long ago. Now, we're not where we want to be.
Right.
There are issues that are unresolved and challenges that remain. Certainly the Trump administration's war against the trans community is a concern to all of the LGBTQ community. And we have to keep active. And hopefully Stonewall will revivify us so that we are able to continue with the work that needs to be done.
Well, Athena, when the parade comes up again this year, lots of people will be out there, not just people from the LGBT community. How do you feel about seeing all of that now? All these people, the importance of just being there to see this, witness it.
I think that I won't take away from it and say that it's not a good thing. I think that it's amazing. But I also think that it is also how do I say this? I don't want to say that it's not a great thing. I don't want to say that I'm not happy about it, but I'm also thinking to myself that once this day ends on Saturday, will the support still remain? Will the support still be there, and will the support still continue? Everyone always wants to rally in front of the cameras and rally in front of the media and social media and everything to make a platform for themselves and everything, and I think that is wonderful. Just to be seen for that day, and then come Monday, no one's anywhere to be found. No one's being heard anymore because Pride is now done, and people will feel like they've done their part to honor who Marsha P. Johnson is, not realizing that on Tuesday we may wake up to another social media aspect of another trans woman being killed. And then, of course, we're prideful and we're happy about who we are and that we have our day and that we have our time and we have our community and we have our safe space, but not realizing that trans people don't have that all the time. Trans people are the most marginalized community currently right now when it comes to the LGBTQIA community.
Thank you both very much, Athena Vaughn and Don Gorton, and happy Boston Pride.
Yes.